Hello, screensavers and Super Sentai. My name is TBSGuy, and I'm a little bit late on this one, but let's nonetheless have a conversation about the Invictus Gaming World Championship skins, because, well, let's be honest, the fact of the matter is that these are all pretty darn bland, aren't they? Like, they all look pretty much the same as each other. Like, you could make a convincing, reasonable argument that 5 of these characters are the exact same cosplayer in different outfits, and then they're a supportive brother who goes along with them to all the conventions, like in his Rakan costume. They have extremely similar physiques, down to, like, they have similar noses, they have similar lips, they have similar jawlines, they have the same eye color, their costumes are clearly just, like, the same costume with a few different bits grafted on. Aesthetic ideas like these wing pauldrons are reused over and over again with no real care or consideration being made to the individual character. And I think the first time I saw them, I tweeted out a joke, something along the lines of, you have a problem with the character design of your Prestige team lineup skin when the frickin' Power Rangers do a better job of differentiating their characters from each other than you do. And on the one hand, I'm right about that. On the one hand, I'm completely right about that. It is way easier to tell an individual Power Ranger apart from the others at a glance than it is to tell, say, Camille apart from Fiora. Like, if you put Camille's blade legs on the Fiora model, I wouldn't know if it was a Camille skin that has a sword for some reason, or if it's a Fiora skin that has blade legs for some reason. I wouldn't know which one is which. If you took Kaisa's shoulder things and made them hover over, like, either Fiora or hell, even LeBlanc, I'd be like, is that just a weird Kaisa skin? I'm not really actually sure, because they are so incredibly similar to each other. But on the other hand, I also think I'm completely wrong, and I think that joke and that particular approach is completely wrong for this particular case. So let's start by talking about affinity and differentiation. So affinity is what it sounds like, basically. It's the similarities that occur between different characters. Not just in terms of, oh, these two characters have the same color, but in the sense of what design elements are repeated across these characters, what design elements tie these characters to each other. For example, Leona and Diana have an affinity in that they are both tied to celestial elements. Like, Leona is the sun, Diana is the moon. They have that celestial theme in common that gives them an affinity. But they are tied to the sun and the moon, which are very different things, and that gives them differentiation from one another. You see what I mean? So, demonstrating with the Power Rangers, each of the Power Rangers have completely different colors, but their costumes share the same basic design. We've got this diamond pattern going on the gloves, on the boots, on the chest. They have the same belts, they have the same boots, they have the same gloves, they have the same, style of neck cravat thing around them, and they have pretty much the same style of helmet with a few individualistic differentiations. We don't talk about the Green Ranger, he's just weird. But then, of course, there's the differentiation. They all have completely different colors. Like, the colors are primary colors. They're as different from each other as could possibly be achieved. And they have different helmet designs. You can see the visors on each individual Ranger are actually very different from each other, with a very distinct shape language going on. And of course, each individual helmet also expresses the characteristics of a different dinosaur from which the Rangers draw their power. So you get this character design lineup that tells you these characters are all part of a team. They're all working towards a similar goal, but they are also each of them distinct individuals, like with individualized powers, with individualized approaches to life, with individualized ideas and thoughts and feelings and stuff going on underneath there. And that extends into something like the design of the Mega Sword and the various swords that the Rangers ride around in, because of course each Ranger summons a different animal as a robot to ride around in, which are completely different from each other, and then eventually they come together to form the Mega Sword, in which each different element is united into a greater whole for that purpose. So, like, the character design fundamentals of the Power Rangers are really, really strong in that area, where the thing that they kind of fall down on is they all look like cheap plastic costumes that you buy at a Halloween store, but that's a discussion for another time. This is not really true for the Invictus Gaming skins. These skins have, like, there's of course the game design requirement that when you're on the Summoner's Rift, it's kind of important that you can tell whether someone is like Camille or Fiora or LeBlanc, or Irelia, or Kai'Sa. It's important that you can tell them apart on that level so that you know what their gameplay is. But besides those like basic requirements for usability in the game, the skins have been systematically wiped of differentiation, and differentiation at every point possible has been replaced with affinity. For example, you can see the little split tails that Camille has got going on there. Same thing goes on with Fiora having a tail like that, and Irelia having those twin wing tails like that as well, and the same thing goes for the split in LeBlanc's cape. And that's being replicated in the shape language of the pauldrons going on in Kai'Sa, and of course, Rakan has his long, swooshy cape as well. Attempts are being made constantly to create as much affinity between the characters as possible. Same hair color, largely similar hairstyles between as many of them as possible as well. You can see Kai'Sa, Fiora, and Camille, basically the same haircut, like some of it a little shorter, some of it is a little longer, but it's basically like the same exact hair. And the same goes with the shoulder pauldrons you've got going on here. That feather motif on the shoulder pauldrons repeated across 4 characters. Not really any way to make it happen directly on Kai'Sa, but then they try to do it with the collar instead that has a similar shape language to the LeBlanc collar, right? So there's all these attempts to create as much affinity between the characters as possible, to wipe out differentiations between them. And in criticism, I think in general, it's important to hold true to a set of principles. Like when I talk about character design, usually I talk about the importance of individualism, the importance of having the character's history on display, their background, where did they come from, what kind of life did they lead, what kind of ideals are they trying to live up to, like what kind of aesthetic are they drawing from. And generally I consider that it's important to draw from as many different aesthetic sources as possible. Even when you're creating within a unified team aesthetic, try to use different colors, try to use different shape languages. Like one of them could be inspired, as the Power Rangers indeed, inspired by different animals and stuff like that, unified under a team aesthetic, but still, you know, you can do a bunch of stuff. The Invictus Gaming skins don't even try to do this, and what you end up with is a result where if you take each individual skin as a character design on its own, right? This is an individual character design, this is an individual character design, this one, and then you start comparing them to each other, inevitably you come up with that unflattering comparison that they all look the bloody same. No one cared enough to bother to try and differentiate them. No one bothered to try and be creative about how these character designs could be presented differently. And I think that's the wrong approach to take here. I think the more useful, constructive approach is to say, okay, these are clearly not meant to be considered individually. They are not meant to be considered as distinct character designs separate from one another. They are meant to be considered almost exclusively in the context of the whole. And when you approach it from that angle, when you approach it from, okay, instead of seeing this as 6 individual character designs, see it as one character design split across 6 characters, what do you get? Well, something that is quite interesting in its own way. And there's also like something going on here in the massive group splash art that we've got going on, which is repeated throughout each of the individual splashes. In the background behind the team, there's this tall mountain with a face carved into it, this overwhelming, imposing, powerful figure looming in the skies above them, behind them. And on its chest is the logo of Invictus Gaming, the team. This is repeated throughout each individual team skin, because they all have the same background, with the towering figure of Invictus Gaming standing behind them, watching over them. And that gets at the point that's being made here, where we usually expect esports teams to celebrate the individualistic accomplishments of each player. Like, they generally, in the past, they've tried to take as much of the personality of each player as possible and pour it into the skins so that it's recognizable. Oh yeah, that one's supposed to be that guy. Like, oh yeah, Twitch is Imp, he's rolling around in the grass like Imp did at the tournament stage. Oh yeah, that's funny. I can remember that. And Faker's got that thing. Oh yeah, the Faker skins do this thing and that thing. As much as possible, they've tried to recognize the individuality of each person who was playing these champions and recognize and celebrate the accomplishments of each individual on the team in their own way. What's going on here is something different. This is not celebrating the individualistic accomplishment of each person by themselves, but the accomplishment of each person as part of the team unity, as part of the team whole, right? And that's the point of wiping out all those differences. That's the point in making the characters have so much affinity and so little differentiation, is to say the history of where they come from doesn't really matter. The history of like the kind of lives that they've led that were different from each other? No. The kind of ideals they may have had that were different from each other? Wipe those away. All the signs of all the things that divide these characters from each other have been systematically wiped away as much as possible and replaced with a single overriding commitment to a similar ideal. This is an accomplishment. This is a celebration of unity. This is a celebration of cohesion. This is a celebration of dedication to one singular ideal, dedication to one singular goal, dedication to one singular set of principles shared between all of these individual characters that turns them into not just 6 individuals fighting towards a common goal, but a group of people, a community of people fighting towards a common goal, putting aside their individualistic considerations in order to further like the ideals of the team as a whole. And I think there's value to that. Like, there is value to that. This is the presentation. Like, Riot usually works with the teams themselves, and they usually work with the players themselves in order to create these aesthetics. So, engaging with the team skins in good faith, I'd say this is what they wanted to present. This is what celebrating their world's victory means to the players. This is what it means to the team. It's not celebrating the individual accomplishments of each player that much. It's celebrating what they all managed to do together, where they all managed to get together, where they all managed to help each other to get to. And there is value in that. Now, I still have individual criticism of each of the character designs. Like, for instance, Fiora and Camille just look so much like they could have like different body types underneath the uniforms. Like, you could do just a little bit to differentiate them, just a little bit more. I keep wanting to make that objection, but then I come back to the idea that, yeah, but that's not what's being celebrated here. What's being celebrated is the accomplishment of the unity of the whole. Now, something that is extremely tempting to do, which we are not going to do, is to say, well, that's because they are a Chinese team, and Chinese people don't care about individualism, they only care about collectivism. We're not going to do that, because that's the stereotype and a highly inaccurate one at that. Like, I don't want to get into the politics of the whole thing, but suffice it to say, China is a very big country with a very, very long history, a whole lot of different cultures inside it, and reducing all of that down to everybody works together to do the same thing and nobody cares about individualism is very reductive and a bad idea in general. So I will say that, like, without meaning to generalize too much, there's a different relationship, probably, in Chinese culture with the idea of individualism versus collectivism. Like, there's a different relationship to the concepts involved in the distinction between individualism and collectivism. And that might contribute, like, if you come from a Chinese cultural background, you might have a different reading of this idea that all the characters are have this complete affinity with each other than you do if you come from a Western perspective. But to get any more specific than that would require you to be an actual expert in Chinese history and culture, which I am not, and which I would imagine that most of the people who are going to be watching this video aren't either. So, to summarize my point and sort of try to tie a little bow around this whole thing, it is entirely legitimate to criticize each individual character design in this lineup for being pretty much the bloody same as each other. It's entirely legitimate to point that out as a point of criticism, that they all just look the same, that they are all just repeating ideas that are expressed in each individual skin. These are legitimate criticisms, but it is also legitimate to say, yeah, but those criticisms are missing the point. Those criticisms don't really matter that much because it's not trying to express 5 highly individualized characters. It's not trying to express 5 highly individualized personalities or histories. It's trying to express something common within the ages of a single ideal. It is also perfectly legit to criticize the fact that they're all pale and have blonde hair, which, you know, again, speaking of different cultural contexts, can send unfortunate messages which don't really apply, again, outside of the specific cultural context of, you know, the West. A complicated discussion I'm trying to get across here is that it is possible to view the same design through different lenses and come up with different critical conclusions based on those different lenses. And what I find interesting is to take on the perspective of another, like to take on a different set of basic ideas and try and come up with a reading from that perspective and use that to inform your criticism going forward. Not necessarily, oh, because there is another possible way to read it, that means all other criticisms are invalid, but we can take these perspectives together with each other and use them to come up with a more coherent and more complete criticism than we could if we only looked at one individual, like from one particular direction at it. I've tried to be very careful, as you can probably tell, in my use of language here, because it's really easy to accidentally use inaccurate language and promote some rather bad ideas. This got uncomfortable towards the end. Let's end the video here. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed this discussion of character design when it comes to skins, you can feel free to hit the subscribe button. You can hit like, you can hit bell icon. All of those things are very helpful. They're good for the channel because numbers go up, and YouTube likes it when numbers go up. As long as numbers go up, YouTube will not personally come to my house and kill me, which I hear is what happens if you lose more than half of your subscribers. So please help me. If you want to support the channel directly, then I do have a Patreon where you can sign up for like a monthly subscription if you want to. And like as usual, $1 on Patreon is worth like 1.5 to 2,000 views on YouTube. So if you want to help me or any other content creator that you like out, if you want to really make a huge difference with even just a tiny contribution, those direct contributions help. Whether it's me, whether it's someone else, they help a lot. If you don't want to do a recurring subscription, I get it. Money is tight always. You can hit me up for a single tip in some of the links down in the description. You can go, hey, you made a good video one time. Here's $1. That's worth 1,000 views to use. Good job. I would also be very grateful for that. If you can't do that, or if you're not willing to do any of that, that's also completely okay. I take this support as a gift, not as a obligation. Yeah, what else? All right, if you haven't enjoyed this video, well, there's a dislike button down below that you should feel free to hit. A dislike button which may look pretty much exactly like all the other dislike buttons on YouTube, but which secretly, in its heart of hearts, harbors a deep desire to be different, to stand out, to become something no one else has ever seen before, to pupate like a ugly little caterpillar and emerge as a beautiful, unique, spectacular butterfly. So if you want to click the dislike button, you should probably click it before it does that, because like once they pupate, they're squishy, and it's like, it's icky to touch. You get this weird feeling in your fingers that just won't go. You'll remember the texture of that little cocoon. It's like, you don't want to do that. So if you need to click it fast before it pupates and mutates and becomes a unstoppable kaiju that destroys several cities on the east coast of the United States of America. Thank you very much for watching.